I didn't wake up that morning thinking I'd be staring down the barrel of a broken system. The day started out like any other, a light drizzle falling against my window, the smell of coffee wafting from my kitchen. I grabbed my usual black blazer, adjusted my tie in the mirror, and headed out. The streets were already alive, vendors shouting about fresh bagels, taxis honking, the distant hum of a street musician's saxophone. Just another day in the city, or so I thought. My name is Andre Carter. I'm a defense attorney, and I've spent my career fighting for people society likes to forget. Innocent men and women swept up in a justice system that doesn't ask questions as long as it gets convictions. You'd think I'd be used to the grind, the weight of it all. But let me tell you, nothing prepares you for the moment when the system comes for you. I'd just finished a case, a tough one, defending a man who'd spent 3 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. We'd won, but victories like that leave scars. As I made my way down Main Street, the city's pulse steady beneath my feet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then I saw them. 2 officers, tall, broad-shouldered, and walking with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing the world bows to you. I'd seen plenty of their type before in courtrooms. Officer Trent and Officer Mills, their badges gleaming even under the overcast sky. They weren't from my neighborhood. I could tell that much just by the way their eyes scanned the street, looking for something, or someone. "Excuse me, sir," Trent called out, his voice carrying a tone that wasn't really a request. "Can we have a word?" I stopped, my briefcase in one hand, my other stuffed into my coat pocket. "Is there a problem, officers?" I asked, keeping my tone even. I'd learned long ago not to give them any excuse to escalate. Mills stepped closer, his hand resting on his belt. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area." "You match the description." I fought the urge to laugh. "And what description might that be?" Trent's lip twitched. "Why don't you show us some ID and we'll go from there?" Now, I knew better than to argue. My dad had drilled that into me as a kid. Always comply. Always stay calm. But I couldn't ignore the irony. I defended people in situations like this for a living, and now I was the one under the spotlight. I pulled out my wallet and handed over my driver's license. "Carter, huh?" Trent muttered, holding the card up to the light. "What are you doing around here?" "Walking to work," I replied. "I'm an attorney." His eyebrows shot up, and for a moment he looked almost amused. Mills, on the other hand, wasn't buying it. "An attorney, huh? That's a nice suit. Guess it pays to bend the rules." I stayed quiet, letting the jab slide. Mills glanced at my briefcase. "What's in the bag?" "Legal documents," I said. "Mind if we take a look?" I could feel my patience slipping. "Actually, I do mind. Unless you have a warrant, you don't have the right to search my belongings." Mills's hand tightened on his belt. Trent stepped closer. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Mr. Carter." I raised my hand slightly, showing I wasn't a threat. "Look, officers, I'm just trying to get to work. I've done nothing wrong, and I've been more than cooperative." Apparently, that wasn't enough. Before I could react, Trent grabbed my arm and twisted it behind my back. The briefcase fell to the ground, the latch popping open, papers scattering across the wet sidewalk. Mills was on me too, forcing me to the ground as onlookers began to gather. Resisting arrest, Trent muttered as he slapped handcuffs on my wrists. "For what?" I shouted, my voice edged with anger now. "I haven't done anything." But they weren't listening. They hauled me to my feet, ignoring the growing murmurs from the crowd. I caught sight of a young woman recording the scene on her phone, her expression a mix of outrage and disbelief. At least someone was paying attention. They shoved me into the back of the squad car, the cold metal of the cuffs biting into my skin. As the car pulled away, I looked out the window, my mind racing. I'd always known the system was broken, but now I was seeing it from the other side, and it was worse than I'd imagined. The police station was exactly what you'd expect, cold, gray, and humming with a kind of sterile hostility. They led me through booking like I was a common criminal, fingerprinting me, taking my photo, and tossing me into a holding cell. "You might want to get comfortable," Mills sneered before slamming the cell door shut. I sat on the bench, my mind still spinning. This wasn't just about me. This was about something bigger. I'd been targeted, and I knew it wasn't random. Someone wanted me out of the way, someone who didn't like the cases I'd been taking or the attention I was drawing to the system's flaws. About an hour later, the door to the holding area swung open. A woman walked in, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She wore a navy blue suit, her badge clipped to her belt. Lieutenant Kate Morales. I'd heard of her, one of the few officers in the department who actually seemed to care about justice. "Mr. Carter," she said, unlocking the cell, "we need to talk." I followed her to a small interrogation room where she sat across from me, her expression unreadable. "I've reviewed the circumstances of your arrest," she began. "It's clear there was no basis for it." "No kidding," I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. She sighed. "I want to apologize. This should never have happened." "Apologies don't fix broken systems, Lieutenant." She nodded slowly, as if she'd expected that response. "You're right, but I need you to understand something. This isn't just about a bad arrest. It's about a culture. And it's one I've been fighting to change from the inside." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. She seemed genuine, but words were cheap. "Then maybe it's time you got some help," I said, "from the outside." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. Instead, she handed me my belongings and walked me to the front door. Outside, a crowd had gathered, protesters, reporters, and plenty of familiar faces. My community. The moment they saw me, a cheer went up, but I held up my hands to quiet them. I wasn't done yet. Over the next few weeks, the incident became a catalyst. The video of my arrest went viral, sparking outrage far beyond the city limits. Protests grew, demands for accountability echoing through the streets. I filed a lawsuit, not just for myself, but for every person who'd been through what I had, and worse. Lieutenant Morales kept her word. She worked with me and a coalition of activists to implement reforms. Body cameras for officers, mandatory bias training, and a community oversight board with real authority. It was a start, but we knew the fight was far from over. 6 months later, I found myself back at the station. This time, I wasn't in handcuffs. I was there to speak to a group of new recruits about justice. Not just the kind written in law books, but the kind you carry in your heart. The kind that treats every person with dignity, no matter the circumstances. As I stood before them, I thought about how much had changed and how much still needed to. The road ahead was long, but for the first time, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. Because justice isn't about perfection, it's about progress. And as long as I had breath in my body, I was going to keep pushing. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. Together, we can shine a light on the shadows and bring about the change we all deserve.